Founder and CEO of Warm Robots, Goldie Chan.
Let me unmute myself first. Hello, everyone. It's so wonderful to join you today. So I'm going to go ahead and start sharing my screen. So give me a second to start this share. And we are going to get into this talk where we will today discuss a subject that I think is on everyone's mind, which is how do you keep your sanity in the middle of what has been a very interesting year, I think, for quite literally everyone. So this is the talk that I'm giving today. It's a brand new talk, so I am so excited that I get to give it to everyone here. So today we're going to talk about mental health and your personal brand, how to keep your sanity while growing your brand. And I know that these two things feel like non sequiturs. They don't feel necessarily like they mesh together, but I will say it is possible to do both. So we're going to cover a little bit of column A, growing your personal brand. And then of course, we're going to cover a few ways to think about separation of work and home, which I think a lot of us are also struggling with as well. As you can see, I'm actually currently doing this keynote from my home studio, and normally I would be filming from one of my more remote locations. So I think all of us are dealing with this right now. So let's get into it. Let's get into this talk. I love this quote from Serena Williams. I've grown most not from victories, but from setbacks. And I think that this is true when we think about our mental health during this time. It's very, very easy to be incredibly harsh on yourself for not accomplishing more, or if you see your peers or colleagues doing so much more during this time that you think, well, in 2020, I should have done X, Y, Z. But it's good to give yourself a little bit of leeway, a little bit of a break, especially since this has been a particularly tough year. Okay, so this is a little bit about me. I'm going to go over this section quite quickly. This is the quote from the Huffington Post that I always think is super hilarious. If you haven't met the Oprah of LinkedIn, you should. So for 2 years, I was the #1 content creator on LinkedIn, specifically under branding. And now I'm the founder at Warm Robots, a social strategy agency. I write for Forbes on personal branding and storytelling in the digital age. I'm a LinkedIn top voice, and I also create content. I'm in the Producers Guild New Media Council. And here are a few places that I've been featured in. And normally, during normal times, I am a global speaker. And for those of you tuning in from different parts of the world, hello. I guess I'm still a global speaker. Okay, so let's get into it. We're going to go over a few different parts. Why build a personal brand? Why does mental health matter? 5 ways to build in better mental health habits. Homework. I love assigning homework. And then we'll open it up for Q&A. Okay, so why do we want to build a personal brand in the first place? Here are some things to think about when you're considering if you want to build a personal brand at all, if you want to take on that extra work onto your plate. #1, building credibility. #2, strengthening your network. #3, sharing the wealth of knowledge. And I'll be going over some of these in future slides. Becoming a stronger advocate for internal and external causes. And if you are currently gainfully employed, having higher job stability. So let's go into one of these. Strengthening your network. Now, I want to establish that the more people that you know, the more you'll be able to do. And this is true in general. And normally during other times, along with this side, I'd say host an in-person event, get to know people locally who are either in the same vertical industry or share the same job role as you, are also entrepreneurs or also work in tech, etc. But since we can't do that right now, one of the great places that I think is helpful to spend some time on is LinkedIn. So making sure that you are connected to people that you already know on a platform like LinkedIn will be helpful. And of course, it depends what platforms you're active on. For me, I'm incredibly active on LinkedIn and Twitter. So I like to make sure I'm either connected to folks that I want to stay in touch with on LinkedIn or Twitter. Okay, share what you know. One of the tenets of building a strong personal brand is being able to say why you're an expert in a certain area. So if you are, say, an entrepreneur who's working in children's education, it's really great if you can start creating content around children's education and sharing trends and forecasts, etc., around that subject matter. By sharing what you know, you naturally become an expert. Okay, becoming a better advocate internally. So this is true if you're working in a larger organization or you're working across several different teams. If you have something that you're putting your weight behind, which I think this year especially, we probably all have causes that we've put our weight behind. It's helpful to have something that you're known for, because that is what will build your personal brand. I think when a lot of folks think about building a professional brand, they stop at the point of having their own opinion. But ironically, having your own opinion is the flavor that will build a strong brand. Because everyone can have, I love to use food analogies, everyone can have the same bland cake, but it's the icing, it's the filling, it's maybe even what you put inside the cake that makes the cake unique. And the same is true of your personal brand. Okay, and this is for folks who already have or say currently are in a 9-to-5 job and are building their products on the side. Job stability has been incredibly important for a lot of folks. And so I'd like to still keep this slide in there. If they know who you are, they'll want to keep you around. Now, this is also true for client work too. So if any of you who are listening and watching this are also dealing with trying to keep and maintain clients, the more visibility you have, the more that people are aware that you exist, that your brand exists, the more they will remember to rehire you or ask you to join their team or work on a project or hire you for something. So this is true outside of simply the job universe, but also true with client work as well. And I love to share this. Having a personal brand as a leader sets up everyone, including your team, for success in any climate. So the moment that you as a leader of your team has a personal brand, has things that you stand for, has a broad network, is very involved in your, say, local community or in your global community in your sector or vertical, everyone underneath you on your team also benefits from that. Why? When they're doing outreach, they can mention you, and if folks know who you are, that always helps open doors. So to me, a lot of personal branding is about opening doors. But now that we've talked about some of the basic tenets of personal brand rather quickly, we're going to go over how we can build in better mental health habits into our lifestyle that also will help us, hopefully in the long run, have a stronger personal brand. Now, I want to stop here and say, one of the main reasons I wanted to give this specific talk is I cannot tell you how many female entrepreneurs or entrepreneurs in general I've spoken to who have been incredibly burned out by this year. This year has been, even for businesses doing very, very well, this year has been tough on employees of those businesses or contractors of those businesses. This year has been tough on partnerships, etc. A lot of things have changed. And I think when things get tough on business, it can also be tough on your mental health if you were expecting to have a very good year and that expectation falls through. I think a lot of us have been feeling really heavy, really exhausted. And once again, as I mentioned earlier, the lines have completely blurred for a lot of us between our work and our home life. So I'm going to address a few of those things right now. And once again, I can't see the chat right now, but please drop in your questions that you have, and I will be happy to answer them at the end of this talk. But let's get into 5 ways to have better mental health and still build our brand. And I'm going to assume that every single person in some capacity who is watching this or listening to this is a leader. So that's how I'll refer to everyone for the remainder of this talk. So here are 5 tenets. 1, remember your why. 2, seek successful pivots. 3, create self-care routines. 4, create boundaries. And 5, think long-term. Now, I know 5 is the toughest of them all, mostly because we can't predict what will happen in the near future, but let's try. So let's get into each of these 5 different tenets. Okay, so number 1, remember your why. I've noticed, because I do quite a bit of consulting for C-level executives on their personal brands, I've noticed that even at the C-suite level, folks are losing steam a lot. They're forgetting why they joined a company in the first place, why they're building a brand in the first place. So this is my first piece of homework to you, which is dig deep and remember, what is your purpose? What is that elevator pitch that you give for why you're building your product or your brand or why you're part of a team? What is your purpose? And the reason why this helps is that it helps recenter us. It helps us find our core to get rid of a lot of noise. Now, there is so much noise happening right now that can be incredibly distracting from running a successful business, or let's be honest, keeping our business above water, keeping our heads above water right now has been more tough than usual. So by remembering our why and by helping the others on our team or who are also working for our business remember the goal of the brand is very helpful. Number 2, seek successful pivots. I love this because I think there's something really wonderful about looking to women, especially who have had a good year or who have survived this year with strength. So thinking about that, but also brands run by women or brands in general that have had a really strong 2020 or even 2019 because they were thinking about change. And that's the other part of this, which is when we go through change, regardless if it's global like it is right now, or if it's just a really tough changing year in general, one of the ways that we can pick up our steps is to look for positive examples of women or brands who are doing really well. And the reason why we do this is an optimistic outlook helps with our mental health. Having examples that we're not looking at as, oh, I wish I had done that, but instead looking at them as, oh, maybe I can try that. Changing our mindset also helps with building a really great personal brand. because right now I think there's so many people who are incredibly negative for very, very reasonable reasons. If you are a positive, genuinely positive voice in your space, there's something incredibly attractive about that. So I'll give that to you as a point, which is if you can find a source of optimism, if you can find positive examples to look up to and to work towards, that's a great way to keep your mental health a little bit safer. Number 3, now this is just basic mental health 101, which is self-care routines. How can we take better care of our bodies, our minds, and our relationships? And I mean this, relationships on every level, romantic, family, work, etc., friends. Any of those kinds of relationships, I think, have maybe also gotten a little bit muddy during this time. And that will be my next point that I'll talk a little bit more in depth about. But how can we think about a routine that is sustainable, that we can start picking up, that maybe replaces something that we used to do? For example, if you used to always eat lunch with your colleagues out and that was a nice break, can you occasionally go have a meal outside, or at the very least take a brisk walk every couple of hours to get yourself outdoors and back out into the universe? It's helpful to have those breaks that you put in because we're only human. We're not meant to stay inside 24/7. So building in strong self-care routines that will take you into 2021 will be very helpful. And then my last point on this slide is, how can we forgive ourselves? That is my next piece of homework for you. What is one thing, one failure, I'm going to put this in air quotes, that you had this year as an entrepreneur that you can forgive yourself for? Go. Okay, number 4, set boundaries. Oh my gosh, I cannot tell you how many people I've had this talk with. Because our work and our personal lives are so muddy right now, there's a lot of boundaries that have been crossed, of course, because we are living where we're working where we live. Some of us have gone back to a traditional office space to work, but for the most part, most of us have not. So how can we set boundaries between our work and our professional lives? I'll give you a couple of ideas now to think about. One is timing. So it's very easy, and I myself have fallen into this trap of working 24/7 because you're at home and you don't think about it. It's already nighttime, you're still doing work, but having timed boundaries for your work life and your personal life is very, very healthy. And in addition to having the work and life just timed boundaries, what is also helpful is having an accountability partner, someone who is in your circle, who understands your work life a little bit at least, who can keep you accountable for separating out and keeping your personal life very, very safe and separate from your work life. And how can we establish these as mutual boundaries? How can we establish this as something that everyone in our household, if we live with other people, agree on and sign off on? So definitely start thinking about how can you better set boundaries if you haven't already. And if you have set boundaries, but they don't feel quite successful, how can you rearrange those boundaries so they will be successful? Okay, now the toughest slide of all to talk about, thinking long term. I was on a call recently where someone asked me what was my plan for the next 5 years. Now, to that, of course, I answer, Who knows? In fact, if someone does know exactly what they're doing for the next 5 years, I applaud you, because I think most of us don't know what we're doing from 2020 to 2021. So when we are thinking about thinking long-term, I mean in the next 3 to 6 months. So I mean Q1 and Q2 of next year, and Q2 of next year being very, very, very far out. But thinking in terms of 3-month blocks. Starting to, especially if you feel burned out, if you feel exhausted, thinking about tasks that you're doing, thinking about building your brand in terms of what can you do next week? Who can you talk to next week? Who can you talk to the week after that? And if you feel like it's so overwhelming to think about the next 3 months or 6 months, just thinking about the next month, right? So the moment you start to feel overwhelmed by thinking too far ahead, narrow down that window. And this is the slide I normally leave at the end of my brand talks, which is on brand awareness. If no one is listening to you, then you don't have a brand. But I'm going to amend it for this talk and say on mental health. But if you're burned out, you won't have anything to say. So if you want to build your personal brand, but you are so exhausted and so irritated, as I'm sure a lot of us are, and so all of these emotions, it'll be very, very difficult to build a strong personal brand. And I like to leave with some of these social media platforms to consider. Honestly, I would take Facebook off of this and maybe put in TikTok now. But we have the main platform that if you're not already on, please create a presence on, which is LinkedIn. And then the other two platforms that I primarily devote my time to, which is Twitter and Instagram, which are both interesting platforms depending on what your business is. So of course, it depends on what you are trying to build your brand around and what your personal brand is built around. If you work in fashion, you'll probably want to replace one of these with Pinterest. Okay, so here is my homework. I want you to take one day off this coming week, and if you can't commit to that, take one half day off. I want you to plan both mental and physical activities that will relax you. And then I want you to document this, and I want you to share it on one of the social platforms that you're on. So it can be as simple as this beautiful, relaxing image and then doing a caption with it, or it can be a write-up on the half day you took off and what you did to really help with your mental health. I'd love to see this, and feel free to tag me if and when you do this exercise. And this is, of course, where you can find me on the different social media platforms. Feel free to connect with me on any of them. I look forward to hearing from you very soon.
So Goldie, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so I do have one question from somebody.
Great.
And the question is, what are the best avenues for building a brand during COVID?
Wow, that's I think here, I'm just going to exit out so I can see the questions in here. So I think the best places to look for building a strong personal brand during COVID, to me, it's all about how do you best communicate. So I know that for some of us, we're in Clubhouse, and video and voice messages, in Clubhouse is the way to go. So if you love voice, Clubhouse is a great place, obviously, for entrepreneurs to meet other entrepreneurs and chat. Now, if you are like me, I love everything text-based. So I love communicating on a platform like Twitter, which is incredibly text-based, and also LinkedIn, where you can do long-form articles, as well as Forbes, where I also write long-form articles. And then if you're thinking about video content, Of course, there's some folks who really love building their brand on YouTube, which is the classic long form video channel. For some, they're starting to build out really interesting brands on TikTok, which I find super fascinating. And then the old standby, if you want to think about short form content, of Snapchat or Instagram stories. So it really depends, first of all, how you best communicate, and then picking a platform off there. But it also depends on who your demographic is. So if your demographic is, say, slightly older and slightly more male, you're more likely to find them on a platform like LinkedIn than you are on TikTok. So it really depends on the demographic that you're targeting.
All right, so did anyone have any other questions for Goldie? No? All right, well, thank you so much, Goldie. That was such a wonderful talk, and we appreciate you spending some time with us today and dropping those gems.
Thank you so much. And I hope that everyone has much better mental health in, in 2021 is my hope.
Well, you'll see me on Twitter, and I'm going to take you up on that little exercise you just gave us for next week.
I hope so. And like I said, everyone, please, I am on basically every platform. So you can find me on literally every social media platform that exists pretty much. And if you do this exercise, please tag me in it or mention me, because I would love to see folks doing this exercise live.
Excellent. Well, thanks so much, Goldie.
Thank you.